I'm here speaking to you today as a mother, a wife, a former teacher, and a former patient at Kingston General Hospital. In 2009, I was diagnosed with colon cancer. I had a 9-day stay in the hospital, and I had some excellent treatment, and I had some decidedly unprofessional and disrespectful treatment. But I want to share with you briefly one highlight of my experience, tell you a little bit more about what we do, and then where we're going. On each of my mornings in the hospital, I was visited by a young resident. He was warm, he was compassionate, he was professional. I didn't fully realize how much I had developed trust in this young man until he explained he would have to intubate me. He explained what he was doing and why he was doing it, and I had perfect trust in him. But alas, my body was slow to regain its functions, and after about day 7 of having nothing by mouth, I was feeling pretty discouraged. No bowel sounds, nothing. He came in and examined me as usual, and then stood at the end of my bed and said, "Mrs. McTavish, if I were in a situation like yours and had your operation, my tummy would be acting the very same way." That changed my life at that moment. I felt normal, I felt understood, and I felt recognized as a person. He saw the person in the patient who was lying there. 2 days later, I went home. 2 years later, I wrote him a letter. In 2009, I was fortunate enough to be invited to join the very beginning of our Patient Advisory Council. We started very slowly. We designed readable name tags, such as you'll see here on both sides. We designed whiteboards. Lots of people have those. We eliminated visiting hours. We modified our signage. We revised a patient handbook. In the past year, we've trained 2,200 employees on patient family-centered care. We have a lot more work to do, as I know now. As the co-chair of our advisory council, I'm first to speak at orientations along with my colleagues. I'm the first to speak to all medical residents, and I participate with my colleagues in interviewing new hires. So we're pulling a new generation into the healthcare profession whose understanding of patient-centered care is deeper than it was. Our challenge now, the way I see it, is to bring patient-centered care closer to the bedside. We're in the process of piloting a bedside shift change. And what you've said about a prototype and testing that prototype is something that's very resonant for us. We're also having our first patient feedback forum this fall. I don't know how much more time I have. Our advisory council is, I think, successful because it asks questions. It has trust in the people that work together, trust in the staff. We try and listen actively to each other with our ears, with our minds, with our eyes, and with our hearts. And finally, the most important thing we have before I finish this part is that we have partners and we have support. I have Daryl Bell, who's here today, who's our chaplain, who first invited me. I then met Eleanor Revoir, who's our chief nurse executive, supported us and me from the very beginning. And without another person sitting beside me, none of this could have happened. We had support from the very top from our CEO, Leslee Thompson. So over to you for a while, Leslee.
Thank you. Thank you, Anndale. And you can just hear the kind of the passion and the energy that Anndale brings to what she is describing, which in fact has been a profound journey in our organization. I have to just tell you a little bit of some of the context in which this, this shift and change has evolved. We haven't been as kind of organized as our UK friends have sounded. We've been very iterative, actually. And when I came to our organization in early 2009, as many people know, we were an organization that was having extraordinary difficulty. and on many levels. But we had lost the trust of our community. We had a lot of really difficult issues that staff were coping with because of the financial difficulties. Morale was challenged, and we were under the spotlight in a very difficult way. You know, when everyone tells you, you know, basically you're bad, you failed, and it was a really tough time, and we had huge work to do ahead. So part of the start of our journey actually was one of a lot of listening and learning over the first, really the first 100 days, and then into a huge strategy session or strategy journey that we went, where we actually applied a number, as you described, a number of the elements. We used an appreciative inquiry. We didn't have any money for consultants, so we did everything ourselves. And in fact, that I think contributed to a lot of the success in terms of how we emerged. And we listened a lot around the themes of the things that needed to get done. And I will never, ever forget in my whole career of the voice of one of someone who had been a former patient in our hospital who described, she said in front of many people, Leslee, I am scared to come to your hospital. And she described an experience that was really dreadful. And at the same time that was happening, Daryl and Eleanor, who are both here, had been working with patients who also actually had had terrible, heart-wrenching experiences in our organization. And we decided that we had so much to do and so much to learn, and our aim of the organization was evolving as outstanding care always. And our mission that was evolving from these sessions became transforming the patient and family experience, because that's what we knew we needed to do. But the we became the we together. And we asked for help from this Patient and Family Advisory Council that they formed. And it wasn't all just get right out of the gate initially. It was a challenge to kind of bring people together and start to talk about the tough stuff in the organization. And not just talk about it behind a closed door, but talk about it with a variety of people. And we made a commitment that and we set the outcome, we set it very publicly, that our commitment, if we're serious about transforming the patient and family experience, is that there would be a patient at the table for every decision and every forum where there is a material impact on the experience of patients. We just kind of threw that out there of saying, we're going to do that. We didn't count up how many committees that would be, how many forums, but we said this is where we need to go. And we really started to grow the experience of working together. And it's been a real discovery. I think part of when you talk about participation, it's been a joint learning, a joint discovery process for all of us. But from an organizational perspective, as much as there is an iterative element of the learning and the experience, we've also been disciplined of saying we have to make it real. And we've got to, populate, bringing people in, the Anndale and her team supporting their success as well. We've had some real challenges, I think, with some staff as recently as at a forum that I was doing. I do these like mini town halls because you can't get anybody out to the big sessions now. And 2 separate occasions in 1 week, people said, I'm really struggling with all this focus on patients, because what about me? I'm the staff. I thought, this is really interesting, because I had to, you try and suspend judgment, right? And think about what are they really saying. And it's hard to do some of this. So because we are putting a huge focus, and I can't actually now, we're so embedded we've got patients everywhere, that it's so embedded in the way we work that it's kind of, even as an executive team and as a board, like you just kind of, well, what would the patients say? Have we got the voice? I can see people like Anndale, see people like others who are very real to us around what would they say, let's go ask them. And that has been, and let's invite them into the process. And that's become a very systematic way now of working, embedding now into huge, huge areas. Just close of saying that from an organization that really people thought that the big work was going to be kind of the financial turnaround. In fact, the experience with this, with the patient experience advisors and the patient advisory council, patients have become the single biggest force of positive change in our organization in such a profound way. As a leader, I never could have imagined what it's like to do what we're doing now. Now that I'm part of this, I can't imagine leading and being in an organization that works any differently. And we have so much more to do. And we know that, but I think what's now there is the core of the enthusiasm and the commitment that even when it gets tough, we're ready to move forward. And really appreciated the experience of hearing you folks today and look forward to the ongoing discussion.
Thank you. Joyce.
Thank you very much, Mark. Oh, is this on? Yes, great. Hello, everybody. I'm really, really delighted to be here. This is a hard act to follow, I have to say. But I'm delighted to be invited to share our experiences of the Patient Voices Network in BC. But I am equally excited to be here to learn about what's happening here in Ontario, in Kingston, and also to hear what our UK colleagues here have shared, because so much of what you've just said, I just want to say ditto, ditto, ditto. We have had so much of the same experience. I hope that some of you have been able to take a look at the Patient Voices Network website, or had the opportunity to read the PowerPoint, because so much of what I'm going to say really comes from the context of what the Patient Voices Network is. So what I'd like to do is just take a moment and, in a nutshell, just explain a little bit about the context. Patient Voices Network, or PVN as we affectionately call it in BC, is a mechanism to recruit, to train, to support patients so that, well, patients, caregivers, and their families to have a voice in system transformation in British Columbia, particularly with an emphasis on primary care and the many changes that are happening at the primary care level, but not exclusively primary care. I guess what's very different about the Patient Voices Network is that it is an initiative now of the Ministry of Health, Patients as Partners Division within the Ministry of Health in British Columbia, and it's administered by the organization that I work for, which is Impact BC, a non-governmental organization that has as its focus quality improvement and particularly ensuring the patient voice in improvement. So from that point of view, there is a lot of support from the top, and that's been extraordinarily helpful. Again, in a nutshell, anybody can join the Patient Voices Network. Any patient, any family, any member of the public, any of you can join the Patient Voices Network. I was interested in that question on the floor about, you know, the poor people, the people who don't always have a voice. We reach out. We really very strongly encourage not the usual suspects to be involved in the Patient Voices Network, because historically when people have been consulted, you know, it's been maybe the retired CEO of the mill in a particular town. That's, you know, those people are welcome, everybody is welcome, but we're really trying to reach out to those that are hardly reached. The benefits of joining the Patient Voices Network are that you receive a newsletter which tells you about the changes that are happening, particularly in primary care, and the engagements that are available for patients, the way in which people can actually hook into the system. You maybe get a poll or a survey asking for your opinion on various issues that particular stakeholders are wondering about. You also have access to skill building, to webinars, and you know, teleconferences, things that you may be interested in. But if you have the inclination and if you have the time, you can also become what we refer to as an activated patient or an activated member of the Patient Voices Network.
And there actually is a process of intake and a process to become oriented to being an activated patient. There is, first of all, an intake interview. Second of all, you're encouraged to go online because there is an online orientation. Third of all, you then go through some sort of a face-to-face, eyeball-to-eyeball experience. So you may be invited to join a full-day orientation with maybe 30 other patients from your area, or more now what's happening, or more likely, is that you'll be invited to a smaller orientation that is done in conjunction with the Patient Voices Network liaisons and the people from the local, the health leads from that local community. But it's really critical that we have that sort of eyeball to eyeball, that the patient sees, hears and sees, concretely what this is about, and that we get to know the patients as well. Once a patient is in the Patient Voices Network, then they receive invitations, and the invitations have come from all kinds of places. We work with the health authorities, we work with the BC Medical Association, with the Canadian Registered Nurses Association, with all kinds of non-governmental organizations, even with folks from across the country. I can't see into the audience, so forgive me please because of the lights, but we've done a lot of work, for example, with the Health Council of Canada. Is anybody here? I saw that their names, yay, they are, all right. So they generously invited patients from the Patient Voices Network to come to a symposium that they held back in the fall, and then those patients were also blogging about the report that they produced on patient engagement. So the invitations are very, very broad. I just want to tell you about where we came from. First of all, the Patient Voices Network is a very young organization. It's only 2 and a bit years old. We are, like you, on a very steep learning curve. And when we started, I think back sometimes to one of the very first engagements, and it was the BC Medical Association invited 8 patients to come to a workshop on attachment. I don't know if you have the concept of attachment here, but what it is that any patient in BC that's interested in having a physician, having their own physician, should be able to have access and become attached to a particular physician. We were invited to have 8 patients. This was unbelievable. We were so excited. But the patients, the hitch was they weren't allowed to speak. So we tried to mitigate that, and we had lots of conversations. And then we thought, you know what? This is the thin edge of the wedge. This is the door opening a little bit. We'll do it anyways. And the patients agreed. It took about 10 minutes, and all of that went out the window. The patients were extraordinarily well received, and it was silly, and the patients became very involved in that workshop. And just a sidebar to that story is that the patients themselves said, what is attachment? I don't want to be attached to my physician. This is ridiculous. And so what followed was really a focus group of a lot bigger number of patients in communications to talk about how to get the message across about attachment. And ultimately, what in most places, what we call attachment is the title that the patient suggested, which is a GP for me. Oh. Made a lot more sense, right? Anyway, that's where we were 2 and a bit years ago. Fast forward to today, there are over 750 there have been over 750 unique placements of patients at all levels of the system. There are about 375 activated patients in the Patient Voices Network. So we have come a long way, but as I said, we're on a steep learning curve. I was asked today to bring some of our learnings. And I could be here for the next 4 hours with our learnings, to be honest. But I'd like to just bunch them into 3 main categories. And you will have heard a lot of these things before. Maybe I'll say it in a different way, but really they're the same concepts. The first thing that we have learned is that what's really critical when in terms of engaging patients is expectations. Expectations of patients and expectations of providers. When I said we have an intake, we do intake and we have an orientation process, the whole purpose of that is to say to patients who are joining the Patient Voices Network that when you wear that hat, you have become a partner. Patient Voices Network is not a lobby group. It's not an advocacy group, even though we definitely think those are important. This is about partnership. You put on your partnership hat and you begin to collaborate, as everybody else has said, with healthcare providers on an equal footing. In terms of the providers, what we have also discovered is that it's incredibly important, and I think it was somebody mentioned it, one of you guys, I think Helen mentioned, it's really important that you look at what is the aim, what is the objective, what are the expectations of the providers when you invite a patient, or hopefully more than one patient, more patients, into your facility or onto a committee or into an advisory group. What is your aim? What is your goal? Really absolutely critical, or else how are you going to know that the change is an improvement, and how are you going to measure it? What we have found really helpful, some of you may have heard of the Spectrum of Engagement, the International Association of Public Participation Spectrum of Engagement, and there are 5 levels of engagement going all the way from inform to empower and consult, and whatever else it is along the way. Really helpful when a stakeholder calls us and says, they want patients, to ask them to really think through what the expectations are, what their expectations are, and where does it fall on that spectrum. And then the other stakeholders, everybody will be on the same page, and we can communicate that to patients as well, so that everybody is sort of starting from the same point. With respect to expectations, I guess one other thing is we often laugh about the words Patient Voices Network, because patient is such a double entendre. Mm-hmm. To do the sea change that's going on here in Ontario and in BC, particularly in primary care anyway, it's not going to happen overnight. And patience is really a virtue and really important. So in terms of expectations, we always emphasize that. Second thing, I'll be really quick, I'm running out of time here, is trust and respect. Everybody's talked about that. And it's not only the case for the providers. We always think about, the providers have to respect what a patient brings into the room. Patients have to respect the providers as well. Many patients come to the Patient Voices Network because they're angry. And they're justifiably angry. They've had a negative experience and they want to see the system change. But when they engage, they have to put on that partnership hat and collaborate and leave the anger at the door. And if some of you have seen the interviews we've done with patients, the videos that we've done, that's the first thing that they say is that, I can't believe there are providers out there who are just as concerned as I am about changing the system. And it's a real aha moment for patients. The providers, on the other hand, say exactly what you have said, Leslie, which is, I don't know how we ever functioned without asking those questions and having patients in the room. Third thing, very quickly, and I guess this is more from our point of view, but if there's any way I can encourage you, or this can inform where you move in terms of patient engagement, is the value of a network. We now have a network because, we've been 2 years in operation. And so there have been all these patients who've had experiences. Improvement is about continuous learning, it's about sharing, and those elements are really critical. The other thing about a network is that when patients are engaged in a particular placement, it sometimes can feel very, very lonely, and it can feel like nothing's happening here and I'm the only person. If they can get a sense of the whole picture, of the fact that the system is changing, it's maybe slow and lumbering, but it is changing, it certainly helps to sustain interest and patient enthusiasm. We are now starting to have a buddy system, so older patients partner with younger patients, or newer patients, to help them become engaged. We have coffee chats, we use teleconferences, webinars, learning sessions, so that patients can share their own experiences. If there is any way of incorporating that into the work that you're doing, I would really highly suggest it. So our learnings, expectations, trust and respect, and the value of a network. I think I'm out of time. Wrap it up. So the question on the table was, patients and families are at the table, what next? I think that it probably won't happen in my lifetime, but the idea of patient engagement is definitely embedded. We need to have it in our genes. It needs to be in the DNA. It needs to be a part of the way we simply the way we do business. And I think that in the future, I'm a cockeyed optimist, I would admit. In the future, I think that's going to happen, and we'll be able to realize the principles of the triple aim, which is what the Institute of Healthcare Improvement maintains as what is critical. Healthy populations with happy staff and happy patients at a cost that we can afford.